Thank you, Chair. And I want to commend Sinn Féin in relation to this very, very important debate tonight. We broadly welcome the bill and think that addresses, the proceeds of crime and the spoils of that, that devastates individuals and communities. And, largely the proceeds is from illicit drugs. And that's largely from cab and assets is from the drugs trade. Now, I have a different view than most in relation to the policy on drugs in Ireland. I think it's antiquated. It doesn't work. Criminalising people for drug use is counterproductive, and we need to do something very, very different. And we need a paradigm shift in relation to how we treat people, why people take drugs in the first place, about the inequalities in society, and all that. And there's obviously a market, Minister, for drugs. There's a huge market, not only in Ireland, but across the world. It's probably the most profitable industry in the world. And people make enormous amounts of money, and they will use some grotesque violence to get them profits. And it does cause chaos in communities. I've seen it in my own community. Deputy Ward is from the same community I'm from. I've seen when I was growing up what drug addiction does to people, what it does to communities. It's pretty bad. And the socio-economical aspects to that are huge. And people turn to drugs for all sorts of reasons. And there's a vacuum, Minister, in society. And where that vacuum exists, people will fill that vacuum in. And usually it's the black market. And usually it's criminal gangs. And as I said, the spoils of that are enormous. And just, we could still be having this perpetual argument in 5-10 years' time about, the proceeds of the drug industry. But I think we need to do something very, very, very different. And that difference is, as I said, we need to have a very grown-up debate about decriminalisation, regulation, and legalisation of certain substances that people use. I mean, this year alone, there's been enormous amounts of money and drugs being confiscated. One of the main reasons was that there was a lot of guards on the roads and so forth. And that can't be sustained over a long period of time. But it just shows you there's a huge demand for drugs. Just for example, cannabis. In September of this year, I will be bringing forward a bill for the regulation and legalisation of cannabis. Right now, we'll see what kind of support we get from other parties. But criminalising people for the use of cannabis it's a complete waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. Locking people up, complete waste of time. Completely waste of time. In some states in the United States and other countries, what they've done, and it's been very successful, is that they've taken control. They have taken the regulation of cannabis, and the revenue from that, instead of going to criminal gangs, it goes to the state. Now that can work in this country if there's will, and hopefully there is the will, because the war on drugs is probably, is it about containment? Is it about keeping working people down? I think it's a number of factors, but the present policies of this government and other governments has been neglect of working class communities. Complete neglect, because it's not on their doorstep. And if you want to die, go ahead. If you want to take drugs, go ahead. But it's not our responsibility. So we need to do something very, very, very different. And that difference, Minister, is looking at this completely different from what we've been doing. Because what we've been doing has been a failure. It has been a failure. The demand for drugs now is more than ever. Even though we have laws in place that all these drugs that we talk about are illegal. They're all illegal to have or take. They're all illegal, but there's more and more people are taking drugs. Not everybody takes drugs, right? but there's more of a demand for drugs. Now, what does that say about our present laws? What does that say? Nobody can actually seriously say to me in this chamber, the laws at the moment make drugs illegal, but at the same time, people are using them. So there's no deterrent. I don't think there's a deterrent. So that's why we need to do something very, very, very different from what we're doing. And hopefully, that difference is looking at this completely different from what we've been doing for the last 45 years.